Hello and welcome to our annual event to speak about the maize crop 2023. As every year, we are pleased to bring you the latest information on the corn crop worldwide, in Europe and in France. We always start with some information about the process of this webinar. You're all on mute throughout this session, but if you have any question, just ask them on the chat or the questions tabs on the right of your screen. We will take some time to answer to them at the end of the webinar. And if we don't have time to do so, we will come back to you personally after the event. And of course, you will have access to the presentation that we will send you by email. As usual, we are delighted to welcome our speaker of the day and expert in the field, Claude Gagnol. Claude is our Integrated Chain and Purchasing Director here at Lima Green Ingredients. He's also the USM Association President for the French maize milling industry and Euromaizier Association President for the European maize milling industry. As our sourcing specialist for wheat and maize, Claude will explain to you the latest information about the corn harvest and what we can expect for this new year. Claude, you're on. We are all listening.
Good morning to the one from America, good afternoon to the one from Europe, good evening to the one from Far East. It's a pleasure for me to share this corn webinar. And we are going to review the key drivers parameters that we can observe from this new corn crop, of course, but we will be focusing as well on the specialty corn we need to run our maize mill factory. Let's start with some fundamentals, and you cannot escape the geopolitical ambience on this planet, and it is affecting a lot the situation of the market, as you may imagine. So first, we need to look at the big players for the cereals on this planet. First, it is wheat relevant with the Russian territory, which is exiting from two very nice, good wheat crop, and it is important to be considered in terms of export, because when we talk about the cereals and the corn, we have to talk about the wheat as well. Wheat and corn, they are used, they replace each other when it is missing, and they can be used on the animal feeding, which is the main segment where we use these cereals. So Russia is, for the second year, having the most important wheat crop, which is very important when we look at the export potential. And for the corn, so you know that the big players are mostly United States and then China. They are less visible, China, because they don't export. And of course, then you have Brazil and Argentina and European territory. So all these five players, they are showing very nice figure this year. And we can say that the crop 23 is expected as the best one over the time for the corn production. So states, we will go in more details later, but in the states, they expect around 380, 350 million tons of corn, mostly 380. China, it looks to be stable, but you know that it's very difficult to read the figures in China because it's very obscure. Brazil, they are finishing almost the crop, and they are having a very nice crop, around 130 million tons of corn. When European Union is exiting as well, is going to harvest, is harvesting at the moment the crop, and we expect around 60 million tons of corn in Europe. And Argentina, you know, Argentina was facing a big problem with the wheat crop, but for the corn, it's a different story. They are recovering with, I would say, a normal production year, ranking at 54 million tons. And India is in the small player, but you have to bear in mind that India, they are having a big problem in this area with the rice crop, especially Myanmar and so on. So there is some ban in terms of export, which may affect the business on the world scale. So regarding the context, the world context, we can see from this graph and this presentation the different area where we farm the corn, and it is reflecting what I was telling to you 1 minute before concerning the most important area for corn on the planet, And you can see in blue, for instance, the exceptional condition for the corn crop in Brazil, for instance. But most of the graph is showing green color, which is a good sign for the production. One thing more to observe is this matter of, I would say, corridor in the Ukraine Black Sea area. So until July, the Ukrainian territory were exporting through the Black Sea area thanks to the corridor, which has been put in force last year in September, I remember. And now, since end of July, this corridor has been put under pressure, and at least it has not been officially renewed. So now the Ukrainian territory, they have to export through new lanes and especially land lanes like via Poland, for instance, and different countries, and as well, of course, through the Danube River. So it is not easy because it is supposing some transportation by truck, or it is complicating the transportation and, of course, the cost. But at least we can see that the Ukrainian export, they are resuming with not normal, of course, not so bad, basically, knowing the fact that they have a big conflict, but the situation is not as bad as it should be. And they are still exporting almost at the same level, despite the corridor is almost over, and they are exporting through new lanes, and they are still active in the market for wheat and corn. So looking at the world context again, this graph is representing the corn price fluctuation over the last 3 years, from 21, end of 20 mostly, until end of 23. So you can see that when you want to buy the corn or any kind of cereals in this context is quite difficult, and we have to be very, very careful with the different market fluctuation, because as you can see, when this conflict has happened in between Russia and Ukraine, the market was on pressure, and suddenly we have observed a very, very big price increase for the cereals. And since that time, despite we had different steps in terms of price reduction, now we can observe a regular trend, downtrend, and now we are reaching the price of the corn, which was almost the same 3 years and a half ago. So it's very important to see that, and we as buyer, we have to be very careful and to be very informed and to not take any risk when it's come to go to the market when the prices are so high. So this map is showing the different situation for the crop on the planet, and once again we can say it's a very nice crop all over the planet this year. USA, of course, they are having their most important crop, almost 384 million tons, even though it's maybe a little bit overestimated. We will see later on, but at least it's a very good crop. Brazil, same. Argentina, looking at the American continent, we can see that it's almost 70 million tons plus versus last year. When we look at Europe now, Europe is showing nicely, even in Spain, which was not so evident a few months ago, because Spain has suffered a lot of drought, especially in the south. But at the end, the harvest is not so bad as per these figures. In France, we have almost the same crop as last year, but we have to consider a significant acreage reduction by minus 10% versus last year. And despite that, we expect to produce 1 million ton plus versus last year, which is quite a good performance. Overall, in EU, we expect 9 million ton plus versus last year, which is bringing Europe at the normal level of production. So in Ukraine, the situation is not good, but not so bad, because we have only 3 million ton less versus last year. And when we consider that Ukraine is still able to produce 24 million tons of corn, it's already a good performance. So now we have to consider this crop is very nice, but we have to look at what may happen in the near future. And I would say the game is now and in the sense that we have to look at after the weather event, especially with this El Niño phenomenon. El Niño, we are exiting La Nina, and now we are entering in El Niño phenomenon. It's the unusual warming of the temperature on the surface of the tropical Oriental Pacific Ocean, while La Nina is the opposite. This is it is leading to the disappearance of the trade winds, and it is occurring when the weather has warmed by more than plus 0.5 degrees Celsius compared to the normal. So this El Niño phenomenon is expected to start by the end of 2023. And if you hear from the broadcast, you can see that at the moment in Argentina and even in Brazil, they are starting facing big issue with the high temperature and some drought. I've seen that on the west side of Brazil, some rivers are at a very, very low level of water. The consequence is of El Niño, it is putting some higher pressure along the ocean coast, new peak of temperature on the worldwide scale, and this event is mostly impacting the South Hemisphere crops. And the drought and flooding are as well occurring. So it depends the place where you are staying. Talking about the different impact on the planet, this is a prediction. I repeat again, it's just a prediction that we can find in the different records. El Niño phenomenon in spring until spring 24 should impact Brazil, for instance, South Africa, and South Asia as well, including India and partly America. So these areas are very sensitive for the cereals crop, for the corn, of course, soya as well, soybean, and as well for the wheat when it comes to talk with about the American North America situation in Montana and so on, and Canada, of course. So we have to be careful, and we have to look at what may happen during the next few months, because it could impact significantly the market trend, even though for the time being, we have a lot of quantity available in terms of corn. The purpose of this webinar is not to talk about the wheat, but I just want to remind you that the wheat situation is not as easiest as the corn situation, because when we talk about carryover for the wheat, for instance, the situation is much more critical. So concerning the corn market, we can see that the production is a little bit above the world consumption, which is making the market more relaxing at the moment. And when we look at the different carryover, we can see that there are some significant volume in terms of ending stock, 290 million tons, and 60 million tons from US. So this is a more comfortable situation compared to last year, but it's much better than the wheat situation. So for the time being, you can see that we have 25% more or less of stock as a carryover end of the year, 25% of the total need. So the production in terms of details this year, we are expecting more than 1,200 million tons of corn. It is once again the best crop as ever seen on the planet. So if we include the carryover from last year, of course, we reach almost 1,500 million tons total availability. So animal feeding is still on the, I would say, on the upside, plus 3%. Food industry, plus 1%. And these are the main key drivers. So the total demand, as once again, is a little bit in accordance with the total availability. And at the moment, the availability is enough to please the total demand. Regarding what is happening in Europe, Of course, we are far away from the best years because in 2014, for instance, we have managed to collect almost 77 million tons of corn. This year, we should be around 57, 58, as already said. But it's not a bad crop. We have seen a much worse crop. But this year, every country has resumed with some normal trend. The most important impact was the reduction of the acreage. And this is a problem for the corn because of the risk of the lack of water. Water is very important, you know, to grow the corn. Concerning the market trend in Europe, so having said that the production is around 50 million, 59 million tons expected, so we can see that the utilization, it's a little bit more as well, so but it's still comfortable in terms of availability. So at the end, the final stock is almost equivalent, 1 million ton less, but it's not so bad. But once again, in Europe, the situation is less good as the one we can observe on the American continent. So the carryover for the corn in Europe, same for the wheat, are not so high. So we have to be careful with that in the near springtime. So these are some figures, at least to see when we import the corn, where is it coming from? And last few months, we have imported some significant volume from Ukraine because I remind you that we are exiting from a pretty bad last year crop in terms of corn, and we had to import a lot of corn to compensate. So most of them was coming from Brazil. It's a news because we were not familiar to import large volume from Brazil, but this year Europe has imported more than 4.4 million tons of corn from Brazil. So then the second supplier is Ukraine, of course, and especially the two big importers from Ukraine are Spain and Netherlands. In France, the crop is expected good, as same as the rest in Europe, but we are not having a big volume available because of the acreage reduction. But nevertheless, we expect to reach more than 11 million tons of corn, which is 700,000 more tons more than last year. But looking at the crop 21-22, it was more than 14 million tons. So it is 3 million tons less than 2 years ago, which is a significant difference. And once again, the corn availability in Europe is expected not so good for the future. Mainly it is sunflower, which is replacing the corn production in Europe, and as well the extension of the wheat acreage as well. It's a winter crop. So concerning the use, we can see that it's a little more or less stable for the local use. So the starch industry is stable. The maize milling industry, semolina, is stable. The biocarburant is stable. And for the animal feeding, what we name FAB in France, it's a feed food. So we expect to have more demand for the corn. The corn is cheaper than the wheat for the time being, so it may encourage the consumption. But this year, we have a big competition with the feed wheat because in Europe, we have a lot of discarded wheat from Northern Europe due to the heavy rain during the harvest time. So we have a lot of quantity of wheat which has been damaged in the north of Europe because of heavy rain during the harvest time. So the exportation, they are quite low. And at the end, we expect to grow slightly the use of the corn, and the carryover will be remaining at the same level as last year. So having said that, let's have a look to the key market parameters that we have to consider as a synthesis when it comes to look at the market. Cereals market and mostly the corn market. So of course there was major criteria like the ratio stock over consumption. as we have seen that it is this ratio is improving. Then, of course, the currency exchange rate, mostly the dollar against the euro against the dollar. But as you know, the rubles is playing a great role at the moment because there is a big depreciation of the rubles, and Russian, they are having, I would say, they are a big game in the market because they play with the export tax, and they have a lot of quantity of wheat to be exported. So now they have exported a lot of quantity. The trend is to the reduction of the export from Russia, but they still have some significant quantity of wheat to be exported at very competitive price. But at the moment, the wheat is the European wheat is competitive versus the Russian one. So the balance between wheat and corn, acreage, and the crop volume, this is to be considered as well. Once again, we can, in the feed sector, we can replace the wheat by the corn and vice versa. So it is important to follow the two cereals. So you have as well the impact of the other cereals crop, like the rice. And this year we are facing a big problem of availability of the rice from Southeast Asia. And as well, we need to consider the soybean production, for instance, and the sunflower. Soybean, because it's mostly from States and from Brazil, the farmer, they can decide to plant the soybean or the corn according to the value they can get from the market. So, and for the sunflower, it's a matter of water availability to grow or not to grow the corn. We know that the corn is very demanding in terms of water, especially during summertime, when it is not the case for the sunflower. Animal feeding sector demand, it's important to be considered, especially that most time this demand is expecting to be reduced because less consumption of meat on the planet. But we have seen that at least for this year, the demand from the feed sector could remain, I would say, quite stable or a little bit dynamic. The ethanol market, it's important to consider that because you know that the oil market, the gasoline and so on, they are very expensive, and it is worth to produce ethanol from corn. And the big players in that respect are US and Brazil. Brazil, it's more cane sugar than corn, but US, it's more than 30% of the US corn is dedicated to the ethanol market. Sanitary regulation is playing some role as well. Maybe not so much for the animal feeding, but for the food grade product, it's very impacting. And we have a new regulation occurring for the tropan alkaloid, for instance, at the time, and it may put some situation in trouble in terms of sourcing of the right quality corn. And last not the least, you have this integrated chain matter premium to remunerate properly the farmer who are committed with some integrated chain production. And it is some premium that we give to the farmer to compensate the difference of yield in the field that we can observe in I would say, standard corn crop and a specialty corn crop. For instance, when we will see that later, but when we produce the corn for the maize milling industry to make the semolina, we need to use the flint quality when the most available corn is from Dant genetic, which is not at all fitting to the maize milling process. You have some possible additional parameters to be considered, and geopolitical instability. I would say it's not possible. It's a reality today. It's a very important situation, and I don't think that the recent event in Israel may affect the market of the cereals, but in any case, it is not contributing to the stability. So we have to be careful with that, and especially with the possible extension of the conflict in this area. So which makes one more conflict added to the one we have at the moment in the Black Sea area. So the weather market, we have been talking about that. We have to look after the situation with El Nino because it is starting now, and it could impact very soon the situation because in Brazil, they are seeding the corn, the soya, and it's the same for Argentina. and we have to look at what is coming within the next few weeks in terms of weather impact. So the COVID crisis, this is something maybe behind us, but who knows? With this kind of disease, and we never know what may happen. Then you have the worldwide commodity like oil, for instance, and mineral. It's a matter of speculation most of the time. But for the oil, you have this matter of ethanol production, which is directly concerned by the price of the oil. Underestimate data. Once again, China is a very difficult situation to predict in terms of forecast and reality. So at the time being, China, we don't see them in the market, but nevertheless, they are buying. They are buying some wheat from Europe a little bit, but we can presume that they buy a lot of wheat from Russia, and now they import the corn from not from US, but from Brazil, and same for the soybean. So we can say that there is some, I would say, relationship in between the BRICS, and now we can see that the trade is more oriented in between the BRICS than between US, for instance, and the different countries like China and so on. So the market is taking some new direction, which is affecting the main market, which is America, United States. And this is why at the moment the market is very bearish. So as a synthesis for this crop 2023, we can say that in terms of bullish factors, very unstable situation in Black Sea area, even though it is calming down, but the war is still occurring, and we don't know about what could happen tomorrow morning. There is a drought in India and more in the Southeast Asia, especially impacting the wheat, the rice, sorry. The US crop is expected very high, so the figures are very high, but we could see some, not deception, but maybe less crop than expected, which could impact immediately the market. So we have to be careful with that within the next few weeks. Concerning the bearish factors, of course, there is this large volume available in America, Brazil, Argentina, US included. This improving carryover, even though for the wheat it's not the same. So imbalance situation between wheat and corn, okay, it could be okay, it could be good, but for the wheat, the situation could be critical during springtime. If the market is resuming, we will see some nervosity for the wheat market, and as a consequence, it will be impacting the corn market, since the two cereals are very much connected each other. We observe a low demand worldwide due to the recession, and this recession, it's not a secret to say that it is due mostly to the inflation. So the inflation is impacting. We can see in Europe, we are facing less consumption. The demand is not poor, but not dynamic, and it is affecting the need of the cereals. And it is, of course, connected with the different economical difficulties that may occur, at least due to the interest rate, for instance, which are very high. We observe what we name the decapitalization of livestock. It's a long-term trend. We know that the meat is expected to be replaced by the vegetal protein. Maybe not tomorrow, but at least the trend is there. And we expect at the horizon of 2050 a significant reduction of the meat consumption. So this is a trend, even though it is not significantly impacting the consumption of the wheat and the corn at the moment for the livestock, but this trend has to be considered. We observe as well this the Ukrainian corn competitiveness. I can say the same for the wheat from Russia. So these two countries are very big players and very impacting the business, at least in Europe. And for the time being, the euro is very strong versus the dollar, which was not the case 1 year ago. It was the opposite situation 1 year ago. the dollar was 0.95 euro, when today it is the opposite. Concerning the different factors to watch, so the bullish factors, higher price of oil, which is encouraging ethanol production. The fact that Chinese could be back to the market by spring. I repeat again, they are in the market, but it is not so much visible because the deal is between Russia, Brazil, mostly. But when they are coming back to the business with the US, it will be immediately impacting the market situation, contributing to some bullish situation. Floating export tax in Russia. So as already said, that the Russian exporter, they can play with this export tax, and they can adapt the export tax according to the competitiveness they want to grant to their export. Of course, once again, El Nino impact has to be considered very carefully, and it has already started to impact. But the most important things has to come by, I would say, end of December, to see whether we have some impact. And the springtime period will be very important to follow up. So concerning the bearish factors, inflation is still at stake. For sure, we don't expect any significant reduction of the price of the inflation, even though it is on the downtrend after reaching very high peaks. But the impact now is occurring because it is concerning a reduction of the consumption, and of course, the consumer has less means to purchase. So the decrease in the meat consumption, we have been talking about that, and attractive South America corn price. This is for the time being. Brazil is very attractive at the moment. So, and the state of play between Russia, Brazil, and China. Now, let's talk about our corn identity preserve organization at Limagrain Ingredients. I would like to come back about this matter of quality corn, which is directly connected with the breeding and the genetic of the corn. On the planet, you have three important types of corn. The most important one is what we name the dent corn. As you can see, according to the picture you have on the screen, it seems to be a very flowery corn. This is the white part in the kernel. On the opposite side, you have the flint maize. Flint maize, for the one who knows, it's reflecting what we name the plata maize. This is a very vitreous corn, and this corn is mostly used to produce some flaking reeds for the process of the flaking reeds, for the flakes, sorry, cornflakes. So it's a high quality corn to make the cornflakes, but it is less available, and it is expensive because when it comes to import it in France, we have to ship it from Brazil and mostly Argentina. And this kind of corn is facing as well a big competition from the dent corn. Flint maize is non-GMO, dent corn is GMO, and the farmer in Argentina or in Brazil, they have better to do with the dent than the flint corn, because they have more productive product with the dent corn than for the flint, and the importer, they have to put a lot of premium, bonus premium on the top of the market price to make the farmer motivated to produce the flint maize. So in Limagrain Ingredients, not only, but we try to find a combination between the dent and the flint to make farmers, I would say, happy, and to please as well the process, the industrial process, the maize mill process. So we have developed what we name the dent flint maize, or the flint dent maize, depends the portion of the dent genetic you have into this breed. But it is a combination between the flint and the dent. The purpose is to have not too bad yield in the field, and the purpose is to get the best quality for the industrial purpose. So as a result, it is impacting the milling yield. For instance, when you use the Dant maize, the maximum you can expect from the milling yield is 53%. The rest, the 47% left, are going to the animal feeding. And you know that when we sell the byproduct, we value them at lower price than the market price because it's a byproduct. So the purpose is to have the minimum byproduct to sell. And when we use the flint maize from Argentina, we don't use this quality, but the one who use this quality, they can expect more than 70% milling yield. So we are in between. And what we aim at our maize mill industry is to get 65–68% milling yield, and which is, I would say, a good performance, but most of the time it's closer to 60 than 65%. As a consequence, we observe different quality, industrial quality in terms of corn type. As it is, we can measure that with some RVA profile on the different maize family. So you can see this different profile when it comes to look at the Dant maize and intermediate maize and the flint maize. So this is important to be considered when this kind of maize semolina is used for the extrusion, for instance, with different cooking parameters. So the most important challenge we are facing in Limagrain, but not only in Europe, and I would say that it's the same for all my colleagues from the different maize milling industry all over Europe. The challenge we have is to find this kind of flint Dant corn. And we have to organize some dedicated production for that. Otherwise, we will not get this corn available for the maize mill. Because at the moment, more than 90% and even 95% of the corn that is grown in Europe or in the world is mostly Dant corn. So we have to find the farmer to grow the flint quality, and we have to make sure they are motivated to have a long-lasting relationship with our mill. So we have to, for that, to give some significant bonus to compensate the gap in terms of yield between the two breeds. But we need to develop as well some dedicated varieties for the flint grain. And this is what we are currently doing at Limagrain. We have been working on this topic for a long time, and we have some specific flint varieties. Of course, it is costing to develop dedicated breeds, but this is the only solution we can find to make sure that we have, I would say, an acceptable combination between the yield in the fields and the milling performance and the quality of the finished product. So what about our crop 23 and I would say the future in our area? So we have observed some lower acreage, same as in France and all over Europe, due to the scarcing situation with water availability. Of course, the farmer, they have some irrigation system equipment, but you know that they can have some shortage of water. Once the authority, they decide to stop the feeding of the water for the farming purpose. And it is happening time to time. It's a very risky situation. So then this year we have a better yield in the field than last year because we have chance to have some shower time to time at the good time, I would say. This is occurring as well for the French territory, but not only, usually in the eastern country as well. The corn is a high quality level. Why? Because, of course, we grow this flint corn, but this year we have harvested the corn around 20% moisture content. So I remind you that we need to get it at 15% moisture content max to preserve it in the beans. So we just need to take away 5% water content. So coming from 20% going down to 15%, it's not a big deal. most of the time in the past, the corn we were harvesting was harvested around 28% moisture content. And it is much more difficult, as you can imagine, to get the corn down from 28% to 15%. And when we have this job to do, we are impacting the quality of the corn, the breakage of the kernel, and the density of the corn as well. So this year we are quite happy because the moisture content from the field was quite low, and the filling of the kernel is good as well, with a nice viscosity. So to compensate this matter of difference of yield between the dent and the flint, we have to encourage the farmer to grow the flint quality, and for that we have to give higher and higher premium to secure the volume. Last year we had to face with very high price level of the cereals. So when you give a few euros to compensate a gap of yield, so if the corn is 200 euro, can be okay. When the corn is at 300 euro, it's not the same story. So it is not interesting for the farmer to produce the corn with a low premium. So we had to increase the premium. And in addition to that, we have more and more, I would say, strict regulation for the mycotoxin level, but now the tropan alkaloid. And we have to be careful with this weeds like datura. It's a very invasive plant in the fields, not only in France, in Spain, everywhere. And this is a very critical situation because datura is a new vegetal species, and which has recently developed. And now, because of the lack of efficient herbicides, it's very difficult to fight this kind of invasive vegetal. So we have to be careful where this weeds is occurring, is growing, and we have to ask the farmer to destroy it by hand sometimes, though. So it's a big headache. And in the meantime, the European food regulation is contemplating the possibility to reduce the threshold of the mycotoxin level. So that means, for instance, we should move down from 1,750 ppm for the Don down to 1,200 ppm. So it's a big issue, and we at the Maize level we are fighting against this regulation to make sure that it will not be enforced, or at least if something has to be improved, not at that level, because considering 1,200 ppm, it's very low and we are facing problem to secure the quantity of maize for the food industry. So that's a big concern. So water requirement, new food regulation, input cost, fertilization, of course, even though it is less than last year. Even though as well, if we were less needing energy to dry the corn because of the level of moisture content from the field. We have, in any case, the farmer, they have to be careful. So it's important to consider the different farming situation and to keep the farmer motivated and to defend them to make sure that they are still in position to grow the corn. So now I am ready for the question, if you may have, and thank you for listening. So let me know your question, maybe.
Thank you, Claude. And that was very enlightening. Yes, just ask your question on the chat or questions tab, and we will take time to answer to them. Okay, first question. Because of the carryover stock for the maize, does it mean that in a few months we may see some price volatility?
If we consider the carryover for the maize, I would say that it's not so much critical. But when we combine the low carryover for the wheat and the one for the corn, we have to be careful about what may happen during springtime and even before. Of course, it will be depending on the market demand, especially the Chinese demand, but on the structural point of view, the most critical situation is for the wheat. And since the wheat and the corn, they are very much connected each other, we have to be careful for that, definitely.
Okay. We also have a question about the harvest progress in France overall. How is it, and what's the expected quality? Not just in Limagne, but for the whole country.
First of all, the harvest in France is pretty much advanced. In our area, for instance, we are in the center of France. It's almost over. Last week, it was 90-95%, depending the type of corn you harvest, but it should end by end of October, the latest. Most of the time, the crop is lasting till end of November, even early December. Having a crop terminating end of October, that means a nice quality crop, at least on the sanitary point of view, because the mycotoxins are developing mostly from the end of October and onward. So now most of the harvest will be stored by end of October. That means very low risk for mycotoxin level. And these, I would say, these observations are valid for the French territory and as well for the center of Europe, because Hungary, they are quite advanced as well.
Okay. Do you expect any troubles in prices if the conflict between Israel and the Gaza Strip expands to other countries in the Middle East?
So having a new conflict is never good, definitely. So we have this big one at the moment between Ukraine and Russia. It is directly impacting the export of cereals, for sure. But looking at the Middle East conflict, which is raising at the moment, in case it is extending, it could put this area on fire. And that is including one sector, which is Suez Canal, for instance. And this is an important route for the export, for the trade. So it could modify the difference, the business habits, I would say. And of course, when the people, they are on stress due to the war and so on, of course, they are less, I would say, keen to consume and to buy, to purchase. So it will be a very bad thing in any case.
What happens if with the extrusion process, if the ratio between the flint and dent maize is not optimal?
So I'm not a technical specialist of extrusion, but what we can observe is this is due to the softness of the corn. The flint corn is more hard than the dent one. So of course, when you look at the extrusion parameters, it's not the same story when you cook the corn from flint genetic and when you cook the corn from dent genetic. So you have to set up the extrusion parameters, and depending the texture you want to expect from extrusion, it may cause some problem, definitely.
Okay. We have lots of questions. Another one, the European Union seems willing to introduce the rotation of the cultures wheat and corn. It will be any impact after this measure will be applied?
So the question is not anymore a question, it's a decision, I would say, to orientate the farming toward new horizon, reducing the use of fertilizer and so on. So just to end, we are talking about the carbon footprint and the warming of the planet. So the carbon trajectory is at stake for any sectors, including farming, because farming is representing, to my knowledge, around 30% of the carbon emission. And for instance, the goal we have in our company is to reduce by 30% the carbon footprint at the horizon 2030. So that means, of course, to change the farming practice. But it's on the way because the farmer, they have already started to consider new way of farming, including the rotation. But there are some contradictory situation because when you want to increase the rotation, that means you have to bring some new crops. And last few decades, the principle was to specialize the different country on one or two production. And for instance, in the States, it's corn and soybean. In France, it's mostly the wheat, for instance, which is a leading crop in France. And I would say we went to some more single production, and the rotation, which means the plurality of the different species that we farm, has disappeared. So now we have to resume with that, but it's not an easy task because we need to build up some new integrity chain to make sure that the new crop we are going to produce, we can value them. And the farmer, they have to consider that in their rotation. But what is at stake is the way they are working with the soil. And what we encourage, for instance, is to limit the export of the vegetal. When you produce, for instance, the wheat, you have two options. One is to export the grain and the straw. You can sell the straw. So that means you do not send back to the soil any kind of, I would say, humus. And the second option is to export the grain and to return the straw to the soil, mixing with the soil, which is allowing to improve the humus level in the soil, the fertility of the soil, because humus is fertility. So, and having said that, you have different practice as well, like the cover crop, to protect not only the soil from the different flooding and so on, but as well to enrich the soil when you destroy the cover crop before planting the new crop. So you can reintegrate in the soil some nice carbon, I would say, humus, and you can bring as well some humus from different origin, from animal feeding, for instance, but not only, for methanization and so on. So there are different possibility to improve the carbon footprint of the crop by storage and by limiting the use of fertilizer. But the big stake is to enrich the level of fertility of the soil by natural means. And one technique which is not banned, but which is not encouraged, is the ploughing of the soil. When you plough the soil, you return the soil, you mix the soil, and you accelerate the degradation of the humus. So you generate some carbon emission, and you generate a destruction of the humus, which is not at the end available for the fertilization. So you can see that there are many possibilities to improve the situation. The main problem we are facing is the transition between the farming model that we were experiencing during last 4 decades, which was consisting in producing the maximum from the soil, thanks to the fertilizer, the herbicide, and so on, moving to a more comprehensive farming practices with less export of the vegetal, enrichment of the fertility of the soil, and the combination between humus and clay and so on. It is helping as well the retention of the water. So there are many benefits. But for the farmer, the change in terms of practice is a difficult and dangerous situation because they are not familiar with that. And in addition, it is risky to lose some yield, some tonnage in terms of crop during this transition. And we have to accompany this transition, but we have no choice anyway.
Yeah. Thanks. We have time to take one last question about gene editing. This one, do you know if there is any attempt to use gene editing, for like the CRISPR-Cas, like to increase the amount of hard starch in dense maize? Is it a reasonable possibility to think about it in the future?
So we touch, I would say, very sensitive topic, which is the way we breed the different varieties, and it is a matter of NBT. So the gene editing is participating in what we name the NBT, new breeding technologies. So this is at stake at the European level, and there are big discussions. The good thing is that it is clearly different compared to GMO situation. The gene editing and the NBT, we are not talking about GMO varieties. So this is a fact, and the people now they are getting familiar with that. And the European community is considering this, and I know that there are some positive talks that should lead to an approval of the NBT soon or late. But the enforcement and will take some time, and it will take the first few years to get it implemented. And then once it is implemented, the time to use this new NBT to produce new breeds, it will take few years more. So the consequence, that means we have to wait until 2030 before getting the first positive results of this NBT, provided it is accepted and voted at the European level, but we are confident.
Thank you, Claude.
You're welcome.
If you have any more questions, feel free to ask them to us. We will respond to it personally after this webinar. Thanks again for this very interesting webinar, Claude, about maize crop. If you want to watch the previous webinar that we made about the wheat crop for this year, we made it a few weeks ago, and it's available on our YouTube channel. You will have access to the link as well, and we will send you all the presentation and the recording of this webinar today. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Claude.
Thank you, everyone.
And see you next year.
Thank you. See you next year.
Thank you. Bye.